Hello and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And we're back at it again with Boombuster Believable, where we're continuing to work our way through the Big Ten, breaking down the men's basketball teams and their outlook for the rest of the season. As we're counting down the last couple of teams, we've got preseason number 10, the Maryland Terrapins. So Maryland currently sits at 19-9 and 10-7, far above their preseason expectations, and that's good for tied for third in the Big Ten with Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. So they have been playing. They started off the season really well. They had some downtime in the middle of the season, and they're back to playing very good basketball lately. And we'll get into that as time goes on. But starting off with some of the key players, we got Jameer Young, who's at 16.1 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 3.4 assists per game, as well as knocking in 1.3 steals per game as well, and shooting 83.3% from the free throw line. Hakeem Hart is in second in points at 12.1 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and he has 1.2 steals per game as well as he shoots 82.4% from the free throw line. So those two guys are very crucial for them down the stretch in some of these closer games. After that, we got Donta Scott at 11.8 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. And rounding out some of their main scoring is Julian Reese at 11.2 points, 7.1 rebounds, and 1 block per game as well. So those four guys are very good in terms of their scoring for the team. Outside of them, things kind of drop off pretty significantly after that, but those guys are a big reason why Maryland is tough to guard, because they do have four good guys that can go and get you a bucket at a lot of different times and a lot of different parts of the floor. But taking a look at their KenPom rankings, they have some of the more interesting KenPom rankings out of a lot of teams. They're very balanced. Their adjusted offensive efficiency is 30th, and their adjusted defensive efficiency is 27th. And that's actually good for an adjusted efficiency margin of 18th. So it proves that it helps to be balanced. And because of the fact that their offense and defense are both significantly above average, that poses for them to be a very strong team. Their adjusted tempo is 217th. So they get moving a decent amount, but they're not some of the crazy high flyers that we see in a lot of teams. Their strength of schedule is at 51st, so nothing crazy in terms of the Big Ten, but they have played some pretty tough teams, not only in the Big Ten but in their non-conference schedule as well. And going into their key wins and losses, they had a loss at Michigan, 81-46 on January 1st. That is not a pretty loss for them. Obviously, Michigan on the road is a very tough place to play, but that was a very uncharacteristically poor offensive game for them, and defensive, because as we've shown, they're a very balanced team. So thankfully, that hasn't been a huge trend for them, but a little bit similarly, they had a loss at Iowa, 81-67 on January 15th. So we'll talk a little bit about some of their home and road discrepancies. But speaking of that, two key wins for them came at home versus at the time, number 21 Indiana, 66-55 on January 31st. And they followed that up a couple weeks later with a win against, at the time, number 3 Purdue, 68-54 on February 16th, which to date is still Purdue's biggest loss margin. But Maryland's season has been a bit of a roller coaster, where they got off to a very hot 8-0 start and looking like a potential top 10 team before losing 6 out of their next 9 games. But again, recently they've been clicking a lot more, especially at home, and have rattled off some impressive wins as of late, which we talked about with Purdue and Indiana. But looking more specifically at their record at home versus away, it shows that Maryland has one of the biggest home versus road discrepancies. They're currently 15-1 at home, which puts them in the company of Indiana. But they're 2-7 on the road, which is where most of their losses have come from. I don't know if this speaks to their home crowd or arena, or if they're just really bad about bringing that same intensity on the road. And I know, obviously, everyone knows it is hard to play on the road in the Big Ten, but for having such crazy home dominance versus road struggles is pretty unusual for a team that is as solid as they are. And Joe Lunardi currently has them as a 7 seed, which leaves them room to solidify their place in the tournament, or potentially make things a bit more uncomfortable and uncertain for them, depending on what foot they end the regular season on. They have a home game on Sunday with Northwestern coming to College Park before they travel to Columbus to take on Ohio State next Wednesday. But that's all for today. We're getting close to rounding out the last of the Big Ten teams, so keep tuning in for the last of these before we get into the conference breakdowns coming up next week. But here on the channel, we have lots of other videos, from Boombuster Believable to the NFL and so much more. So stay tuned for everything we've got coming out in the madness of March and April. But if you want more from us, check out our other videos, like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.